May I now invite the panelists to come to the stage to join us. Thank you very much indeed. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Speaker, may I begin by thanking you for such a positive start to our discussion today, and please allow me to join you in welcoming all the participants of the 5th Open Government Partnership Global Summit here in Georgia. And let me also add that the Open Parliament Day is the best possible preamble to the Global Summit, where almost 100 governments and thousands of civil society organizations will be exchanging ideas on how they are making governments more transparent, more accountable, and more responsive to citizens. Parliaments represent our voices, men and women, youth and elderly, people of different origins, abilities, backgrounds, beliefs, and cultures. Open parliaments engage people in making decisions. They acknowledge their responsibility to the electorate. Parliaments keep governments accountable and consistently cooperate with civil society, with citizens, and with interest groups. More than 180 parliaments and organizations from 82 countries have signed the Declaration of Parliamentary Openness since 2012 to reinforce their commitment to achieving openness and transparency at all levels of governance. Open Parliament responds to a fundamental principle whereby we will only achieve sustainable development if we work together to ensure we leave no one behind. Put very simply, legislative openness enables laws and government oversight that promotes social cohesion and equitable growth and protects the interests of the vulnerable and of the disadvantaged. At this panel today, we will consider how parliaments contribute to empowering people, creating stronger, more vibrant societies and economies. We'll discuss what opportunities we have in stock and what challenges may hold us back. Today's discussion, as you can see from the screen, is supported by a wide range of organizations that have been active in assisting parliamentary development in Georgia: the European Union, USAID, the National Democratic Institute, GIZ, and IDFI. And I very much look forward to our exchange today, and will be honored to moderate it on behalf of the United Nations Development Programme, an organization with a strong international record in assisting the countries to introduce those fundamental principles of openness. And let me finally conclude this introduction by reiterating how important it is to have this exchange in Georgia, a country undergoing a vital transformation to parliamentary democracy. And as a successful governance reformer and innovator, Georgia has also a lot to share with the world. I'm sure that the OGP Global Summit will help Georgian Parliament respond to the huge public expectation to reverse practices of government by the few and move towards an open and transparent legislation and oversight. Now, on that note, let me open the floor to this extraordinary team of panelists that we have here with us today, both in the room, and in the case of one speaker by video. Irakli Kobahidze, may I please ask you to take the floor once again? I believe we'll benefit immensely from your impressive experience as an academic, as an active member of civil society. And I say with a tinge of pride, a very honored alumnus of the United Nations Development Programme. But in your current role as Parliament Speaker, you're leading the Parliament of Georgia in substantial institutional reforms, which are already showing signs of enhancing openness, responding to the needs of a healthy parliamentary democracy. Mr. Speaker, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for this introduction. I'm proud to be part of this panel and to speak to this distinguished audience about our plans, about the OGP, and about the Georgia's role that we have played during the last year. It was an honor for us to take over the presidency of OGP, and it gave a new motivation to us to ensure more openness, more accountability in the framework of the parliamentary activities. We are proud of our achievements so far, but we should implement further reforms in order to ensure further openness, further accountability and transparency of the Parliament, and also in the framework of our constitutional function, the oversight function, we have to do our best in order to ensure better transparency, accountability and openness of other constitutional bodies. So that is where we see our role and the function of the Parliament. Again, we have done a lot in order to improve the level of transparency, openness, accountability in the Parliament of Georgia. I will name just a few achievements that we have in the framework of the previous Open Parliament action plans. Firstly, I would like to mention that the openness, accountability and transparency was even an aspect of our constitutional reform that we have accomplished this year in the Parliament of Georgia. We have implemented an ambitious reform in terms of improving the Constitution of Georgia, and part of it was the norms regulating the openness, transparency and accountability of different public institutions. In the framework of this reform, in the framework of the constitutional reform, we have introduced the basic right of your administrative proceeding, which is an innovative step that was made by the Parliament of Georgia. And we have essentially improved the regulations about the public information, which was another achievement of this constitutional reform. These norms, these new provisions in the Georgian Constitution will create a very strong constitutional basis for ensuring the better transparency, accountability and openness of public institutions. Now we are working on the new rules of procedure of the Parliament of Georgia, and one of the goals of this activity is to improve the openness, accountability and transparency of the Parliament of Georgia, but also to strengthen the oversight functions of the Parliament. And with better fulfillment of this function, we will of course promote the better transparency, accountability and openness of other public institutions, which will essentially strengthen the role of the Parliament. I would like to mention that it is one of our goals to institutionally strengthen the Parliament of Georgia and to make it a central chain, the central kind of body in the system of government of Georgia. So that's the ambitious plan, and I believe that we will achieve a significant progress in this regard within the next couple of years. The information about the parliamentary activities is absolutely open to the public, and we are really proud of the highest degree of our openness. I would like to mention that also the financial information about the parliamentary activities is absolutely open to the public, which ensures that there is zero doubts about any type of corruption in the Parliament of Georgia. The financial openness, the financial transparency is particularly important when we talk about the openness and transparency in general. And most of these informations are proactively published on the website of the Parliament of Georgia. And we are proud that we are giving the best example to other public institutions how they should act, and we will do our best in order to ensure the same standard of openness and accountability also with regard to other constitutional bodies. We gave the citizens the opportunity to collect electronic signatures in order to come up with the legislative initiatives, which is also another innovative approach that has been introduced by the Parliament of Georgia. We also publish different type of public informations, including the video and audio recordings of the plenary sessions. For example, even the committee sessions are publicly broadcasted, and the relevant recordings are available for the general public. We are now developing a new concept for the website of the Parliament of Georgia, which will be quite innovative, and which will also include the platform for electronic petitions for the citizens, which is another important steps. We have also introduced a new mobile application. So we have the kind of mobile version of the Parliament, the so-called Geo-Parliament application, which gives another opportunity for citizens to interact with the Parliament of Georgia. Now we are developing the annual action plans of the parliamentary committees, and also these action plans are available for the general public through the website of the Parliament of Georgia. We also do our best in order to make the Parliament of Georgia better accessible for the people with disabilities. That is a kind of special aspect of our activities, and we did a lot in order to ensure the adaptation of the Tbilisi building of the Parliament to make it more accessible for the people with disabilities. And again, it is very important for us to ensure an active interaction with the civil society. And for this purpose, we have introduced the Civil Society Day in the Parliament of Georgia. The first event has been organized this year on the 13th of March 2018, and we are going to introduce this practice, and we are going to establish this practice in a stable manner also in future. So we will ensure the annual arrangement of the Civil Society Days in the Parliament of Georgia. Again, we do our best to be open, to be transparent, to be accountable to the general public, and we will also try our best in order to achieve the same standards in other public institutions, in other constitutional bodies. That is our ambitious goal. Again, we are proud of our achievements, but we should implement further reforms in order to ensure even better transparency, accountability, and openness in the Parliament of Georgia and in the Georgian public institutions in general. The plans are ambitious, and we believe that these plans will be accomplished successfully in cooperation with our international partners and in cooperation with the civil society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and a very impressive raft of reforms leading to more openness in Parliament. Sanjay Pradhan, you are, so to speak, the captain at the helm of the ship as Chief Executive Officer of the Open Government Partnership. You were formerly World Bank Vice President for Leadership, Learning and Innovation. You have an outstanding international experience in many regions globally, and in promoting and supporting countries to fight corruption, to bring government closer to citizens, and also to introduce the type of innovative and technology in government systems which we've just heard about here in Georgia. As CEO of the Open Government Partnership, I think it would be very interesting to hear more about OGP's strategy for working with quite a wide range of domestic reformers to make their governments more open, more accountable, and more responsive. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairman of the Parliament of Georgia, Lord Speaker of the Kingdom of Tonga, members of Parliament, fellow panelists, honored guests. It is a true honor for me to be here today, and it is a particular pleasure for me to be here at Parliament's Day, because you represent the heart of what Open Government Partnership is about. You have the pulse of the people. You represent the interests of the citizens. You pass laws and budgets in the citizens' interests, and you hold government to account in the citizens' interests. Quite simply, OGP seeks to augment and enhance what you do by empowering citizens to oversee and shape government and also parliaments. And let me give you an example to illustrate what I'm talking about. So in Kaduna, Nigeria, when an audit revealed that a hospital that had been promised to citizens actually only existed on paper, the government partnered with citizens to become its eyes and ears. Using a mobile app, citizens can upload photos and feedback on projects directly to the governor's office and to the state legislature. In this way, citizens are providing additional input and feedback to enable the executive and legislative branches to do their work better. In Kaduna, this then catalyzed a record completion of 500 schools and 200 hospitals, improving maternal health and safety. In OGP, reformers from government, civil society, and parliament joined together to make these types of commitments in national action plans. So, for instance, in Chile, the OGP commitment was lobbying legislation, where parliament played a very important role, which empowered citizens to monitor gifts and meetings between lobbyists and public officials to curb influence peddling. In Ukraine, the OGP commitment was to enable citizens to monitor contracts, public procurement contracts, which are the source of corruption, and report violations. In 2 years in Ukraine, this resulted in savings of $1 billion, with 82% of entrepreneurs reporting reduced corruption. If you reflect on these examples, what OGP is doing is it's empowering citizens to be the eyes and ears of government and parliament, enabling citizens to monitor budgets, services, corruption, to enable government and parliament to serve citizens better. In this way, OGP seeks to augment representative democracy that you represent with citizens' direct participatory democracy. And when we can combine the two, we can really get more benefits to citizens. So we look to you for your leadership and partnership in deepening engagement of parliaments in OGP in 3 ways. First, we look to you to support legislation to advance open government so citizens can be the eyes and ears. 23% of OGP action plans require legislative action. So you can support access to information, budget transparency, and you can advance global norms across countries in areas of open government. 47 OGP governments are introducing open contracts. You can advance this across countries. The second area where you can deepen parliamentary engagement is, as we heard from the Honorable Chairman, by making parliaments itself more open to citizens, by opening legislative institutions for citizen transparency, citizen participation, and oversight. We heard that very powerfully from the Georgian example just now. And the third way in which you can support open government and we can join forces is globally. You can join forces with OGP members to stand up for democracy and civic space, which is under attack in many parts of the world, which undermines parliamentary effectiveness and open government. And nationally, you can join forces in supporting sustaining open government through political transitions of government. So quite simply, we look to support you, long-standing partners of OGP and new members of OGP, to advance parliamentary engagement in OGP and together advance our shared agenda of empowering citizens, serving citizens, and delivering better to citizens. So that's what we stand here ready to support you. And with this, I close, but with just an apology in advance. At 12:40 p.m., I have to run to meet the other branch of government, the OGP ministers who are here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, some very concrete examples of how citizen action can result in substantial changes for the better. Now, I believe Heidi Hautala will join us by video. It's always providing technology is on our side. Ms. Hautala is Vice President of the European Parliament. It's quite difficult to give a very concise summary of Ms. Hautala's career because it was fairly varied, but she first joined the European Parliament in 1995 when Finland first joined the EU. She returned then to Finnish Parliament in 2003 and then became an MEP once again in 2009. She was the Finnish Minister of International Development and State Ownership Steering in 2011 and then returned to the European Parliament once again in 2014 where she remains as Vice President. She's very well known for her strong focus on the environment, on human rights, and on transparency. Over to you. Thank you.
Dear friends of Open Government, my years in civil society, parliament and government have taught me that open government is the single biggest force of transformation of our societies. Because transformation is needed. We need to better respond to the rapidly changing world. And the Open Government Partnership is not a talk shop, but it's built on commitments of the many partners to improve in this regard. Many countries have made it their key instrument for reform. Like many others, I have been delighted to witness the recent peaceful revolution in Armenia and the consequent upgrading of the commitment to Open Government Partnership. Debates in the European Parliament reflect the atmosphere in 28 countries. And three words appear more and more often: transparency, accountability, and integrity. The Parliament must practice what it preaches to others. The European Parliament has always been the proponent of transparency of decision-making. However, the European Court of Justice had to tell us recently that even the very last steps of lawmaking must be accessible to the citizens. One innovation in our Parliament has been a legislative footprint. It is publishing of a list of the persons and entities which have been consulted for a particular piece of legislation by the member who's the rapporteur. You should be made compulsory. Public registers of lobbyists are a good means to promote transparency, and the best practice for me is to publish all my meetings with lobbyists. Even the President of the European Commission, Mr. Juncker, does that. On integrity, teeth need to be added to our code of conduct for members in the Parliament. Conflicts of interest are at the root of corruption and must be eradicated. Now, on the Parliamentary Day of the 5th Open Government Partnership Summit, one cannot overemphasize the importance of parliamentary scrutiny of the government. Accountability of governments to people and foremostly to parliaments is much needed in the world today. The important role of the opposition for parliamentary democracy should also be better understood. Open government partnership can be a major tool also for the opposition to keep the government accountable. And in the Finnish Parliament's question time to the government, the opposition is always given the floor for the first questions. I am happy to see that during your summit and in its side events, also climate action and sustainable development will be discussed. There should be no question anymore about the urgency to combat and adapt to climate change. This adds a new dangerous dimension to already ongoing conflicts, and it destroys living conditions and especially the most vulnerable people. I regret that I cannot be in Tbilisi with you today, also because I am at present exploring how the European Parliament could best arrange its own work in order to be able to implement Agenda 2030 and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals. This all needs a new integrated approach, and parliaments should no doubt take the lead. I am convinced that Open Government Partnership will take a big leap forward with this summit. I look forward to learning from its outcomes and best practices.
Thank you very much. And now we call on Banko Ovala. Senator Ovala, you are the president of the Open Parliament Network of Parliamericus. I hope I've got the pronunciation correct, and an elected national senator of Paraguay. You bring to the table a vast experience in governance and a strong academic expertise. It will be very interesting to hear from you how legislative openness is advancing in the Americas, how the Parliamerica's Open Parliament Network is making a difference, and also how citizen participation fits into this process. And I'm not sure if you'll have the time with all that, but it would of course be interesting to hear about legislative openness in Paraguay also. Senator Overlay, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Un saludo fraterno a los parlamentarios que han venido de diferentes partes del mundo a este evento tan importante. Queridos amigos, la política es la más noble actividad humana porque apunta a la consecución del bien común. Sin embargo, los parlamentos están bastante desprestigiados en muchas partes del mundo. América Latina, sobre todo, no escapa a esta realidad. ¿Cómo es posible que si la política busca el bien colectivo, en este mundo en el que como nunca existen posibilidades de generar bienes y servicios, haya todavía tantos excluidos, tanta opresión, tanta miseria? Necesitamos revincular la política con sus fines esenciales y en ese marco OGP nos presenta un paradigma irreversible que es la de la apertura, la probidad, la ética, la rendición de cuentas de la gestión pública, de modo a mejorar la gobernanza en el mundo. Los parlamentarios en muchas partes somos vistos por la gente común como personas privilegiadas que no cumplen a cabalidad su función y encima no rinden cuentas a la sociedad de lo que hacen. Necesitamos cambiar esta historia, porque el vínculo de la política con su finalidad es imprescindible si queremos mejorar la gobernanza en el mundo. Nosotros hemos impulsado en el marco de Parliamentary, una organización parlamentaria de todas las Américas, asumir el protagonismo de este tema e impulsar los parlamentos abiertos de modo a encarar una nueva historia de gobernanza, de vínculo de los parlamentarios con sus representados, con la sociedad en general y sobre todo apuntar a eso que es fundamental, la transparencia, la probidad, la ética, el empleo de las nuevas tecnologías para poder facilitar y establecer vehículos de comunicación con la sociedad e involucrar a ellos en los temas que afectan su destino. Ese es un punto que no tiene retorno. No hay posibilidades de construir sociedades más justas si no somos capaces de tener gobernanza que apunte, que se sustente en estos fundamentos esenciales. La América representa una región donde en gran mayoría los parlamentos hemos iniciado procesos de transparencia legislativa y hemos impulsado planes con la participación de la sociedad para establecer parlamentos abiertos, transparentes, que tengan vínculos activos y sobre todo eficaces con la ciudadanía. Hay algunos países que han iniciado, entre quienes está el mío, mi país, el Paraguay, y hemos visto planes muy buenos de acción en Chile, en Costa Rica, en Colombia, en Guatemala, en Paraguay. Y hoy en Parliamentary estamos impulsando mecanismos que garanticen que la experiencia que vamos acumulando en este proceso pueda servir a todos los países para hacer realidad esto de parlamento abierto. En la opacidad y en el secretismo se incuba los problemas institucionales y sobre todo una de las más terribles lacras que tiene la política, como es la corrupción. La corrupción ha impedido construir sociedad más justa, porque la corrupción ha hecho que muchos recursos que son públicos no hayan llegado a los destinatarios. ¿Cómo vamos a luchar contra eso? ¿Cómo vamos a hacer que existan parlamentos que luchen por el bien común, que trabajen leyes que favorezcan a las mayorías, no leyes que favorezcan a los poderes fácticos y a los grupos empresariales que son capaces de sobornar a los parlamentarios que olvidan sus raíces y sus vínculos con el pueblo y legislan para los intereses más importantes del capital de diferente naturaleza? Eso vamos a poder revertir en la medida en que somos capaces de entender lo que significa parlamento abierto. Un parlamento que cuenta a cabalidad lo que hace. ¿Por qué lo hace? ¿Cuáles son los bienes, los valores que están en juego en las decisiones que se toman? Y eso va a ser posible en la medida que la sociedad interactúa, tiene canales de participación. Hoy las tecnologías de la información y la comunicación nos presentan herramientas extraordinarias para poder avanzar hacia esta dirección, facilitar el vínculo con la sociedad y hacer que la sociedad pueda controlar a sus parlamentarios, controlar a sus autoridades de todos los poderes del Estado. A mí me emocionó escuchar al presidente del Parlamento de Georgia decir: no hay posibilidad alguna de corrupción. ¿Cómo quisiera que en mi región, en las Américas y en mi país pudiéramos decir muy pronto lo mismo? No hay posibilidades de corrupción, porque hay rendición de cuentas, porque hay instrumentos claros, porque hay un posicionamiento de mucho mayor probidad y ética frente al bien colectivo. Creemos que ese es un camino irreversible. No se puede retornar de ese camino. Hoy en América tenemos algunas dificultades en términos de la transición de nuevos gobiernos. En mi país hay un nuevo gobierno que va a asumir el 15 de agosto. Y yo soy senadora y fui reelecta, entonces tengo que buscar nuevos compañeros en el nuevo parlamento para avanzar con este tema. Y así mismo ocurre en muchos otros países donde la transición de nuevos gobiernos pone el desafío de seguir articulando e incorporando a nuevas personas que se sumen a este esfuerzo. Este año en abril en Parliamentary hicimos la tercera reunión regional sobre Parlamento abierto y nos damos cuenta que es un camino que va mostrando una esperanza nueva hacia una política mucho más eficaz en la consecución de sus fines. Y sobre todo que tenemos crisis en la democracia, porque la democracia, si bien nos permite libertades para hablar, para reunirnos, para participar en elecciones que cada vez son más libres, más garantizadas, sin embargo, no tenemos una condición esencial de la democracia que es la igualdad ante la ley. Y para que haya igualdad ante la ley, para que haya igualdad ante las políticas que se diseñan para los ciudadanos, necesitamos que los estados funcionen, que el Ejecutivo cumpla su tarea de políticas públicas, que el Legislativo haga leyes y controle la aplicación de las leyes. Pero todo eso en la opacidad no funciona. El resultado ya tenemos. Tenemos que revertir los indicadores de corrupción, de mala gobernanza en nuestra región si queremos construir un mundo más justo. El fundamento esencial de la democracia es una sociedad justa. Y una sociedad justa se construye solamente con gobernantes probos, transparentes, honestos, que entienden que la administración de la cosa pública tiene que ser en público y en conocimiento de todos. Ese es nuestro enorme desafío. En Parlaméricas trabajamos hacia esta dirección, estamos hoy afianzando instrumentos que permitan realmente hacer que los parlamentos sean abiertos. Y quiero cerrar esta intervención con algo que dije al principio. OGP, con esta iniciativa, nos presenta un paradigma, todo un paradigma en la gestión pública. Y ese paradigma es un paradigma irreversible. No hay posibilidad alguna de justicia social, de sociedad justa, de equidad, si no hay apertura, rendición de cuentas, transparencia, probidad, ética, que son, creo que, los fundamentos esenciales que nos impulsan y que hoy constituyen las bases de todas nuestras conversaciones en el Parlamento de las Américas, con lo cual venimos a compartir con ustedes esta iniciativa, estos esfuerzos, con marchas y contramarchas, y deseamos invitarles a muchos otros que se sumen. El año que viene tendremos nuestro 4º foro y nos damos cuenta que hay una idea que va aprendiendo y que es cada vez más firme en nuestra región. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Senator Overland. In listening to you, one really senses that accountability, transparency is not just about reform, it's also about promoting values on a day-to-day basis. The last of our panelists is Helen Clark. You were Prime Minister of New Zealand for 3 successive terms. You were a Member of Parliament for more than 27 years, having first become a parliamentarian, if I understood correctly, at the age of 31. You were the first woman to lead a party to electoral victory in New Zealand, and you were the first woman administrator of UNDP. And in this context, I think it's appropriate to mention that during your tenure at UNDP, it was ranked the most transparent global development organization. You've engaged widely in policy development and advocacy across the international spheres, in economic, social, environmental, and cultural issues as well. And you've advocated consistently and strongly on sustainability and in favor of tackling the problems of climate change. Today, you join us in your role as OGP Ambassador, and we very much look forward, as always, to hearing your views, your advice, and possibly even your concerns. Helen Clark, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Niels, Mr. Speaker, Senator, and everyone participating today. I've actually spent my whole working life on these issues. Before I became a Member of Parliament in New Zealand, I used to teach about parliaments at the university, and then there were 27 years in the Parliament, the 8 years at UNDP, an important part of the work being to, of course, support the parliamentary capacity development. And now I act as a global ambassador for open government partnerships. So I have enthusiasm and passion around these issues. And at UNDP over the years, I saw the very valuable work that it does in many countries. I think over 70 countries it has parliamentary support programs, building the capacity of the parliaments to do their job, to scrutinise, to monitor, to engage with the public, to pick up important issues. For example, a number of parliaments are forming SDG caucuses. Others are active on climate change. UNDP always supported the women's caucuses of parliamentarians. So it was all very, very important work. Now, of course, I know the New Zealand scene intimately, and let me say some words about that. Because New Zealand was the first country in the world to offer universal franchise. That means 125 years ago this year, women fought for and gained the right to vote in New Zealand. First country in the world, 1893. Now, we consistently rank as right at the top of the Transparency International list for being the most open, accountable, non-corrupt country. We were one of only 6 countries in the world in the 20th century that maintained a fully functioning parliamentary democracy or democratic system throughout that century. Now, you add these things up, there's a long history of commitment to democratic processes, and that means strong institutions. And one of the institutions that has to be really strong is the Parliament, because it does hold governments to account, and it is the people's voice on what is happening in government. Now, we had major reforms in the New Zealand Parliament going back more than 30 years, and they made it an absolute rule that all government legislation must go to a parliamentary committee for scrutiny. In practice, most of it had, but that became absolutely mandatory. And once having gone to the committee for scrutiny, the committee must open to submissions from the public. It must hear submissions. And for anything major, it is likely to travel around the country, not expect citizens to come to the capital. It will go out and travel and listen, which is very important. So these were major reforms. Of course, the government's budget is scrutinised very, very carefully by the Parliament. I would say dissected by the Parliament. Each department's area goes off to the specialist committee, officials are called, ministers are called. There's extensive debate and committee debate in the Parliament. And we've also had, since the 80s, a standing committee to review regulations. Regulations are what some would call delegated legislation or subsidiary legislation made pursuant to an act of Parliament. But these are all scrutinised as well. And all of this is backed by freedom of information legislation, which goes back to the early 1980s. So you can basically get any government information in New Zealand, including the cabinet minutes. Everything is public. Now, there was another couple of significant reforms in the 1980s which supported the Parliament's capacity to be inclusive and also supported representation of citizens. How the Parliament organises its annual timetable has a bearing on who can effectively be a Member of Parliament. If your Parliament sits for very long periods of time, which don't take into account school holidays and other things, a lot of parents will feel it's too hard to be able to be away from home for long periods of time. And our reforms ensured that there were always parliamentary breaks or recesses in school holiday periods, but that the Parliament had a broken up schedule. It might meet for 3 weeks, have 1 or 2 weeks off, and carry on that pattern through the year. That was rather important for people with family responsibilities. Also in the 80s, the system came in of MPs having properly supported parliamentary officers, because prior to that, you could say being an MP was almost like a family business. Most MPs were men, and their wife backed them up from home on the phone. That changed. There was a professionalisation of the system with paid staff, which was rather important. Now, a major improvement in the New Zealand Parliament in getting inclusion and diversity was the change in the electoral system. Because like a lot of countries, we'd always had a simple first-past-the-post system. And they tend to be the most unfriendly to getting diversity in a parliament. When I entered the parliament in 1981, only some 8 or 9% of the members of parliament were women. Well, today it's close to 40%. And the big change came when we changed the electoral system to one modelled on Germany's. It's a mixed member proportional representation system. And the parties then were under much more pressure to have diverse representation, particularly on their parliamentary lists. And so that means we have a parliament today that's much more inclusive, much more representative, many more women, many more Indigenous people, many more people from Pacific origin, which is a very important minority in New Zealand, MPs from the Asian communities and from the LGBTI communities. So this Parliament today looks nothing like the one that I first entered. And this means it's more user-friendly to the population because they can look at that Parliament and say, there's someone like me there. There's someone who will understand what I have to say. Since 2006, members of Parliament in New Zealand have been required to disclose all their personal interests. This is an anti-corruption thing. That you must disclose whether you have any other income, where is it from, what are your assets, and so on. We also have the salaries set independently. The MPs don't set their own salaries. That's done by an independent commission. So there's been a lot of changes around the New Zealand system, long a democratic one, but to make it more inclusive, to have better interface with the public, to make it more representative over the years. And since I've left, which was early 2009, with the coming of age of social media, of course I've seen our Parliament take to social media with Parliament itself being Facebook active, Twitter active, and so on, let alone the members of Parliament who will also use this as do members of Parliament around the world. So as you said in your introductory comments, Niels, it's so important for parliaments to be open to the public, to engage with the public, and I think all the reforms that we've seen over more than 30 years in New Zealand, enabling the greater diversity, the greater ability to outreach, the active encouragement of public participation in legislative processes. This has all been very, very important. And while we don't always get everything right, it's, I think it is a useful set of examples as to how to reform parliamentary systems. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I believe the potential of the panel was certainly realized. I think it was a very, not only interesting, substantial, but a very varied discussion. And I'd like to finish by thanking Parliament, through the Speaker of Parliament, once again, for enabling this excellent start to the OGP Summit. So thank you very much to all the panelists and to you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like now to call on the next panel, which I think goes under the name of panel number 1 for some reason. If they would like to come to the stage, please. Thank you.